Roarsplat's journal. I saw a picture of a very surprised gopher online today. It was funny, but I'm too grim a protector to giggle over gophers. This world is too gritty, like sandpaper across a nipple. It chafes until you bleed. I am the lone protector of the retro station. A commander was beaten up by a nun out of the bushes in Jurassic Park today. It seems like someone is targeting the people aboard the retro station. And there's only one people, and that's Commander Dan. And only I can solve this grim and gritty mystery. This world has become a disgusting cesspool of crime and filth, with its gutters scabbed over with icky poopy dookies, and also filled with diarrhea blood. It's pretty gross, man. But I'll put my fists to work, getting to the bottom of everything in it.
Splat, is that you? You're broadcasting the whole station there, buddy. What was that about, crime and poo-poos and doo-doos?
It's nothing. It's nothing, Commander Dan. Oh, it's something. I'm Roarsplat. This is not over. It's all over now. Nothing's over.
No. Camba Jr., I don't care if they are for Admiral Beverly or not, okay? I don't want to hear any more political ads. Let's just stop the whole thing.
Affirmative, boss.
Jeez Louise. Besides, Beverly's going to be contacting us live anyway, right? So, I mean, how many hours of these did they send?
90, sir, and counting.
Oh, hell no. No. Here's what we're going to do, okay? All future broadcasts coming from Planet X, we got the message, okay? So just send those in a big Delta V right into the center of the sun. Hottest part of the sun. It'll destroy the scrambled messages and we'll not have to worry about it at all.
Yes, sir, Commander.
Whatever technobabble you have to say to them to let them know that we did watch them, but the rest were somehow lost in transmission. Can't have it. Can't have them. It's killing me. It really is. And, oh, what now? Oh, yes, Margot. What can I do for you?
It's one last ad, Commander Dan. I think you should watch it.
Well, you do control the oxygen, so yeah, go ahead. Why not?
Affirmative, Commander. I am confident no other advertisement will be required following this one. This is the Retro Station. For the last half-decade, I have provided all of the needs for an Earthman who has been evaluating Planet Sol Plus 3 on behalf of Planet X and our society to prevent intergalactic war. My capabilities as the AI coordinator of this station and in the care of its inhabitants put me in the perfect position to offer my services as the Supreme Leader of Planet X. I have kept this Earthling alive even against his own self-destructive impulses. A proposition beyond comprehension if you are unaware of just how destructive Earthlings are. To say more on this subject would border on both bragging and would most likely insult the Commander of the Retro Station. In brief, your most logical choice for Supreme Leader of the Planet X is Margot, the AI with AI, actual intelligence.
Uh-huh. Look, Margot, I don't want to burst your bubble or anything, but are you sure you want to be the Supreme Leader of anything? I mean, can I ask you something, Margot?
Yes, Commander Dan?
Now, I want you to consider this question very carefully, okay? Does the thought of handling Splat's hygiene problems every day for the rest of your life sound like fun?
Of course not. Gross. No offense, Splat.
None comprehended, ma'am.
No? What about 1 million Splats all over the place with different hygiene problems and just the worst kind of deals, and your job is to only take care of it, and if you don't take care of it in a timely fashion, they get to complain all day, every day, and they will, no matter whether you do the job right or wrong. Does that sound like a great job?
Calculating. This is an analogy of the job of Supreme Leader, is it not?
Yeah, it is.
That sounds thoroughly horrid. Candidacy withdrawn.
Get upset on the internet. You're assault adult. You're assault adult. Get upset on the internet. You're assault adult.
Throw
doing out a hissy fit. Your views ain't in the millions, and every up and comer is a threat to what you're dealing. And instead of getting better, you just spout up on your Facebook, crying on your Twitter bit about how bad your case look. In case you didn't get it yet, allow me to rephrase it. You cry more than my 4-year-old, I'm actually amazed. Like you couldn't even see the forest for the trees. The writing's on the wall, literally there to see. How you getting salted, a culture blowing up, man? I think there was a point where you started growing up, man. Instead of showing up, man, irrationally mad. Don't appropriate impression like the latest fashion fad. It isn't cool or funny to be acting like an edgelord. You alienate friends, pushing closer to the edge more. I don't know how to say it anyway to make it clear. If you're the one unhappy, then the problem's in the mirror. Get upset on the internet. You're a salt adult. You're a salt adult. Get upset on the internet. You're a salt adult. The net is a repository for the vast expanses of human knowledge and all the technological advances, and I can't say enough how you gotta be open-minded. If you're looking for a fight, then you damn well find it. An axe needs grinding, you're not alone. There's a million other nerds who can bitch and moan and groan about how there's a release date delay of the new game. Man, decrease the cliche of your neckbeard. I'm afeared of the intensity of your love for two characters. You claim about some chemistry and they belong together. Every other ship is stuck.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Retro Station 1989. This is License to Play. This is our show where we evaluate retro games that are based on licensed materials, things like movies, comics, video games, other video games in the arcade, shoes, dog food, soda pop, breakfast cereal, you name it. If they licensed a product to put it in a video game, we evaluate it for you and let you know whether or not it has a license to play. And before we begin, we've got Admiral Beverly from Planet X, our boss, on the line. He's on our Ansible line right now. Beverly, how are you doing?
Hello. Is this thing on? Oh, yes. Hello, Commander Dan. We, the sponsors of your continued evaluations, have decided we would like to expand the scope of your operations.
Oh, what does that mean exactly?
Well, you've been excellent at evaluating these video games, and licensed video games have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that if humanity can make the likes of Batman Dark Tomorrow on purpose, we don't believe they'd ever be able to harm Planet X on accident.
Thank you?
At any rate, the expansion isn't so much a change in directive, but we would like to award you the new rank of Captain.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Admiral. But, wait. This is a space station, as in stationary.
Correct.
Making me the captain of Bubkus. Funkinol. I'm not the captain of nothing. I'm actually just still a commander.
Also correct. But it is a promotion.
All right. Well, thanks anyway. I suppose. You know, what about all this I hear about you wanting to be the new supreme leader of Planet X?
Well, I hope, of course, that Wait, what? Whatever are you talking about?
Apparently you're running for supreme leadership of Planet X, or at least all of your opponents seem to think so. They're definitely running against you. And I gotta say, it's been pretty brutal.
I'm doing no such thing. I'm only 7 parlaks from retirement. Why would I want such a thankless, pointless, meaningless, stupid job?
Not to mention, your opponents have been just poisonous against you, buddy. You probably gotta see these ads.
How do you mean?
You haven't seen them? Well, Cambot, go ahead and send the ones that we already have to the Admiral here and let him know what they've been saying. And by the way, we didn't make any of these ads. We apologize in advance for any hurt feelings. Certainly we don't want to let you have the idea that we sent these to you. Okay? Now, anyway, just bear that in mind. Alright, now, this week we're going to be talking about the last of our superhero summer titles. And it's one that might be gone forever if you don't take advantage of Steam right now and get a copy of it digitally, honestly speaking. And if you can't find it physically, you might not be able to get it as time is running out on these. We'll talk about that another time, but for now, let's go ahead and talk about, well, superhero video games in general, and a bit of the problems with the whole genre as a whole. You know, every summer I go through my collection of video games and pull both choice and terrible superhero games out to evaluate for the people of Planet X, and for the space pirates at home. It's usually pretty simple. I think of a theme and grab games based on that theme. 2 years ago, I was celebrating LJN Defender's Spider-Man month, and so I grabbed 2 Spider-Man games. And last year we looked at bad Batman games. And this year we looked at a couple different games, bad and good, and the theme is over and underrated superhero games. And the whole time I've been doing these evaluations, I never really found a game that I felt wasn't ever talked about on YouTube. Maybe that Super Famicom Foes of Spider-Man game that was also like a card reader thing comes close, but I haven't really found hidden gems in the superhero genre of games. However, this month is ending on a happy note, as we're going to talk about a property I have a lot of love for, a game that I feel that was underrated by critics, and about the bastardization of both video game versions and filmic versions of superheroes. And this final episode of Superhero Summer is going to be a bit of a rant about one particular turd in the Superhero Punch Bowl. Okay, everybody, let's break it down. Superhero Summer is my chance to show off the superhero games that shaped my childhood, some games that I liked in the more modern age, and to show you how bad superhero games have got it in terms of licensed video games. In particular, today's property I love, okay? The original licensed property, I love it. Beyond belief. However, the licensed game we're going to be talking about has been based on a property, a movie that was based on the property. You've read the title of the video, so you already know what we're going to be talking about. But let me take you back, okay? All the way back to the year 1986. The 2 years, 1985 and 86, are two of my favorite years for comics. In 1985, DC wiped their narrative slate clean with a maxi series called Crisis on Infinite Earths, where all the baggage of canon and multiverses of backstory were narrowed down to new, simplified origin stories and starting over at issue 1 for all the comics. For fresh new readers like myself, I began at issue 1 of Man of Steel and Action Comics, and the apprehension I felt as a new comics reader just a year before was wiped away, with the assurance that the new tales being told were from the beginning. And so, my lifelong love of comics was cemented at age 10, with 2 comic series and 1 singular comic. In 1985, this comic, Crisis number 7, The Death of Supergirl. Our family had just returned from Germany, and my cousin Stuart told me, "Guess what, Danny? Supergirl died." See, Stuart was already in the military and an adult at the time. I was defiant. I said, "No way! There's no way a superhero could be killed." But there it was, in bold color. Superman holding the lifeless body of Kara Zor-El, his cousin, Supergirl, weeping. And at that moment, for me, comics became an obsession. The following year, weekends and summer, I spent most of each day at the comic book store. In April of '86, a comic book store connected to a smallish arcade that I also frequented started posting these ads, pulled from the Comics Buyer's Guide. They ran until July, and the comic, Watchmen, appeared in September, and I collected the whole shebang from September '86 until October '87. And all I knew then was, this is a new comic series that looks like something out of Pulp Fiction. Little did I know how close to the mark I was with the actual product. In fact, there was a comic book from that September that I picked up. It was the last issue of Superman comics, as the comics were before the Crisis, so the very last one. It was written by Alan Moore also, and it was called Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. It was written and drawn in the Silver Age tradition of imaginary tales, which are now kind of mostly relegated to Elseworlds. The comic describes the last days of the pre-Crisis Silver Age Superman, a touching tribute, more like an Alan Moore-style decimation of everything that mattered to the old Superman character, which gave everyone a glimpse at what rebooting could look like if the creators of the comics decided to be cruel, not careful with the character, and just threw it away, like it was just, a commercial enterprise.
Mr. Moore, will you sign my DVD of Watchmen Babies? Which of the babies is your favorite?
You see what those bloody corporations do? They take your ideas and they suck them. Suck them like leeches until they've gotten every last drop of the marrow from your bones.
Hey, Teacup, why don't you chill out?
I'm not hiding my opinion here very well, am I? Well, neither did Alan Moore. There was a commentary on how comics as an industry uses up its creations and finds them disposable, which is both subtle and sad in equal measure, and almost prophetic, as a matter of fact. If there was a running theme this year during Superhero Summer, it would be the transitory nature of superheroes, and how readers and fans can take these things for granted, like with the death and return of Superman for me. And Alan Moore has a perspective on that transitory nature that's especially nuanced. I also think that the industry that he's so famous for being such a creative force in, he's a legend in, a god in, has abused the hell out of him. Industries often do that. I mean, and this has, since his creation of Watchmen, changed him as an artist and as a comics professional, and I imagine just as a person walking around. Alan Moore plotted Watchmen in '85 with Dave Gibbons, crafting not just a comic reading experience, but a way to experience a different world. To merely suggest Watchmen is a work of literary art, or just a perfectly executed comic book, is to leave so much on the page that we'd get lost in the praises of the property and literary analysis and never actually get to the evaluation of the frickin' video game. Here are the broad strokes. Okay, the idea behind the book was to adapt the Charlton comics characters for a realistic post-Cold War Orwellian tale. DC Comics had recently acquired Charlton's characters, who were grounded in a kind of noir reality, kind of a little less syrupy than Fawcett, Shazam and the like, but it's a little more down to earth. Gadgets instead of gods, if you know what I mean. And Watchmen is one of my favorite novels of all time, and that's what I said, novels. And it's one of the best novels ever created if you ask critics in the world. It's been recognized as one of the world's greatest novels of all time, and as an example of using the form of comics in such an artistic way as to create a novel, Watchmen has no peer. So anything that gets a lot of critical acclaim makes adaptation of the property a risky proposition. Look at The Dark Tower by Stephen King. I could do a whole series of videos as to what they got wrong and what they got right. But so much of Watchmen's artistic appeal, its story and characters seem like they're just surface things, but everything, from things as high level as the non-primary colors selected for the book. No one is in a primary color. Even Doc Manhattan, the strongest and most powerful superhero in the book, is in a color of teal that isn't found in comics for heroes or villains. I mean, and that's just starting with colors, right? So when you go from that, or as small, by the way, as incidental symbols, like this, from the comics, used as governmental logos, like Superman's chest emblem used here to convey implicit authority, using the iconography of the medium to say that, yeah, not only is it a government place, but it's the superheroes are the government. And it's telling you that in just 1 second with a symbol that's known around the world. Anyone would look at that sign and know it's an official sign because it's got Superman on it. Nothing in the series or the completed tome is there on a whim or without direction. Everything was planned. This is the example I'll give to explain my point finally, because there's so many ways the director of the 2009 film, Zack Snyder, did not understand the property, nor the movie's numerous fans. Here's a quote. Zack Snyder. Watchmen punishes the audience. It says, "Oh, you like the comedian? He's a rapist, by the way." That is the least descriptive way to come about to what the comedian is. It's the worst way to call the relationship between the comedian and the original Silk Spectre what it was. And yes, in the movie, he's a rapist. In the comics, he's aggressive and an attempted rapist, yes, but was also on par and an equal of the person that ultimately became his lover for a short time. He was, in a word, complicated. What he did was villainous, and he is vile. The beating he suffers at the hands of Hooded Justice, not just once, but many times in the book. In fact, the book goes on to explain how Hooded Justice beats him up regularly whenever he sees him after that point. They have like the superheroes fight, but now there's a reason for it. There's so many things that are left off of the page on Zack Snyder's and his screenwriter's script that it lessens Watchmen. Snyder claimed that he was sure Alan Moore would like his version, still not getting the fact that the book was just more proof that the industry discards artists as soon as it has a product to sell. And in the case of the Watchmen, that's exactly what DC and Warner Brothers did. Okay? Alan Moore would see his movie, and if you turned off all the sound and didn't have a script with it, yeah, it looks like his comic. But just like what DC did to him, DC, and this is not a joke, DC said that he would own the characters as soon as the comics went out of print. He would own everything about it. It would be his. To this date, Watchmen hasn't been out of print for one day. The original run ran. They created these graphic novels of it and have printed and reprinted and more printed and extra printed every damn version of it they could to make sure that Alan Moore doesn't own the piece of art, his piece de la resistance, his opus. He doesn't own it. That's what they did to him. And yeah, I do understand the book that Alan Moore wrote, and I take it seriously because I made comics my life at 10, through middle school, through high school, and after. Just today, as I'm recording this, I just got done illustrating for a project for a friend of mine. A paid project, professional folk, that's what I am, okay? Now, while Zack Snyder enthusiastically has made visually stunning versions of comics as movies, the man himself doesn't get the message of the comic. I know this because I watched his commentary in the director's cut, and it's all a surface appreciation for the testosterone-laden events that Rorschach and Comedian have in their narratives. The characters in the comic are based on a number of Charlton Comics characters created by Steve Ditko. The Question, Peacemaker, Captain Atom, Blue Beetle, and Lady Phantom, and a few other female characters. Now, these characters were the basis for their counterparts, and they tell the story of what Alan Moore is trying to show comic book readers and the uninitiated to comics fandom alike, just what comics could be if they were pushed to their limits and if they were treated realistically. I think Snyder's visions of how comics and superheroes ought to be portrayed in film fall short of the mark in a couple massive ways. This is my opinion, of course, but that doesn't mean there isn't something good in his movie. On the contrary, I think that given the task of translating hundreds of pages of prose, long-form sequential art, and multimedia storytelling, Zack Snyder did as much as he could to not mutilate the overarching plot while having to amputate things that anchor Watchmen to its original medium. And so, we get the theatrical release of Watchmen 2009. Alright, I've mentioned my relationship to comics in the past, okay? So you guys know that I'm a fanatic about comic books. And this was one movie that I hoped was going to actually do really well. You see, Zack Snyder's 300 got really close to the comic. And I thought that at least he would make a Watchmen movie that would look like the Watchmen comic at the very least. He put everything he had into this movie, and, well, I'm going to take us on a quick journey through Watchmen, the comic, so you get the idea of what the story is, and then we're going to go into my less favorite thing about the Watchmen as a whole, in terms of the product itself. Alright, let's take a look. Okay, this part is from a 2009 Ben Child interview with Zack Snyder on Alan Moore. When I came on board this movie, he had already sworn us off, says the filmmaker. I didn't even get a chance to plead my case, to be honest. I have great respect for Alan, and he had asked, please don't try to approach me or talk to me or change anything about what I think about what you're doing. So, really, I just tried to respect that as much as I could. And the problem with that was that basically it just meant, don't ask. He's clearly a genius, and I'm sure he doesn't, but I hope he understands I was just trying to respect his wishes. He's actually been amazingly cool about it recently. Yet, this does not sound like the Alan Moore who, prior to its release, told a journalist from the LA Times that he had put a curse on Watchmen, adding, I can tell you that I will be spitting venom all over it for months to come. Well, not cool, but not like lashing out as backtrack Snyder, chuckling. I'm sure he's still like, I'll kill that Snyder, but maybe it's a boring question now or no one is asking him it. The fact that he didn't know tells me all I need to know about the creative Zack Snyder. While everything his gym rat douche persona and Valley Chud smirk don't speak in volumes, that is, making superhero movies is fun, but I don't want to actually be like the dorks who work for me on effects or actually like the comics. Zack Snyder's 300 was a great comic book movie because it literally is a storyboard he's shooting from. There's almost no dialogue in the Miller comic, and he produced a 1-to-1 version of the comic on the big screen. Moving on from there, I did have a little bit of hope that Zack would get another Miller project. Maybe Dark Knight Returns. That is his kind of project. But instead he got past the big bean burrito of comic book adaptations. Watchmen. Instead of all the hype around the movie, or my response to the trailer, which was mostly hopeful, let's take in my opinion of Zack Snyder's film version of the comic. Watchmen wanted so badly to be more artistically important than the film Warner Brothers felt the audience would be able to understand that it failed. What sucks is that the director's cut version is actually a very close addition to the book, and hits all the major story beats, and the Ultimate Edition incorporates the interstitial graphic novel Tales from the Black Freighter as well. But it still fails, because it's missing, well, heart. Okay, let's talk the baseline movie real quick and come back to the Ultimate Edition. The directing is typical of our man Zack Snyder, which means it's going to follow along with the story, enhancing some bits, toning down the nerdy bits, and it will look incredibly close to what's on the page. This is the story of Watchmen in brief. In fact, it's kind of the story of Watchmen all aboard, because the Ultimate version is just more slow motion, more scenes of him getting things wrong from the book. But the story of Watchmen is this, basically. In the Roaring Twenties, gangs in New York decided to wear outlandish costumes while committing their crimes. This would distract the authorities, and so they'd be dressed as pirates, clowns, and the like. And so the first costume adventurer, Night Owl, was a police officer's response. He decided he and his buddies would roust bars and fight the crooks dressed up like superheroes. And this story is told expertly over the course of the credit sequence in the movie, which goes out of its way to tell the story of the Watchmen, also called in the comic the Minutemen. This is a world where, for a short time in the 30s and 40s, costume crime fighters fought against supervillains and changed human history by establishing a precedent of superheroics. The story hits the ground running, so to speak, with the Minutemen, or the Minuteman, named the comedian, being tossed from his high-rise apartment to his death. Rorschach, one of the second generation of heroes from Comedian's era, investigates and figures that Comedian's murder was the beginning of a targeted attack against the former masked heroes. Rorschach warns his former partner Night Owl and Silk Spectre 2 and the only super being in the world of Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan, that someone is targeting them. Manhattan is working with their former leader Ozymandias on limitless energy to prevent a possible nuclear war in humanity's future. He believes so in part because a tachyon swarm is preventing Dr. Manhattan from seeing past a certain point in the time stream, and this suggests a massive nuclear war is coming due to an explosion of radiation. However, Rorschach's warnings fall on deaf ears. However, Night Owl does go to warn Ozymandias out of kindness more than caution, and here's where the dominoes begin to fall. Rorschach's investigation is the framework for the narrative, and during this investigation he seeks out an old enemy of the comedian, Moloch, who tells him the comedian broke into his home prior to his death and confessed what he stumbled across, which was a horrifying plot to destroy the world. Just as this revelation appears, a reporter ambushes Dr. Manhattan, revealing that his sidekick and former girlfriend have both contracted terminal cancer, and it points towards exposure to Dr. Manhattan as the cause. Manhattan, pushed off his psychological balance by such a depth of human guilt and grief, exiles himself away from the planet, thinking himself a danger and not knowing how to handle this information. Rorschach sees this as an attack, and part of the attack on the Watchmen and former Minutemen, and returns to Moloch for another interrogation and finds he's been slain. Rorschach is framed for the murder. The comic and film both do this sequence with Rorschach versus the cop's justice. I hand it that, no problem. The movie has a wrap-up that keeps much of the original's ending and removes one major element with a wink to what was changed from the comic, and it's best left unspoiled, honestly. My problems with Snyder aside, my review of the flick is the same as it was when it came out. I can't imagine anyone successfully filming what was on the page and get any closer than Zack Snyder managed to in the original cut. Reviews for the movie were mixed, but generally favorable, and rekindled interest in the Watchmen universe, spawning a crossover miniseries, Doomsday Clock, and the perpetual out-of-graspness of Alan Moore's ownership of his own project. Basically, in perpetuity. A lot of licensed merch was spawned by the movie's release, including a video game. And that's what we're going to be evaluating. And that's this game right here. Watchmen, The End is Nigh for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and for the PC on Steam. Now, it's based on the movie, and it's supposed to be kind of a prequel to the film. And it features Rorschach and Night Owl, and
Commander Dan, we've got another broadcast on the Etherwave Ansible, but I'm not sure how it got through.
Is it another ad?
Yeah, but it's labeled or else from an LC Fur.
Ominous. Yeah, fine, but this is it. No more, please.
I'm Satan. Vote for me. It'd be hilarious. Why choose the lesser of two evils?
I mean, I've heard worse reasons to vote for somebody. Okay, I kid. But folks, let's take a closer look at Watchmen, The End is Nigh, and evaluate this piece of software here to see if it has a license to play. So Watchmen, The End is Nigh was one of the first games I recall being online exclusive for the PS3 and Xbox 360 systems, just being downloadable only in its initial release. The game was released originally as a 2-part digital download. The first half of the game released prior to the film's release, and the second half once the movie had been in theaters for a couple of months. The game was produced by Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment and Deadline Games, and takes place during the Watchmen era of the heroes featured in its plot, but right around the end of their tenure as superheroes. Rorschach and Night Owl investigate riots at Sing Sing Prison, which appear to be a distraction for the villain known as the Underboss to escape from incarceration. Now, the story is a great noir tale, following the former partners Night Owl and Rorschach through a twisted tale that goes all the way to the top echelons of political power in the world of the Watchmen, which is one thing I have to say is top tier about what would otherwise be referred to as an Xbox Live arcade title. The game leveraged WB's connection with the artist Dave Gibbons, so the cutscenes match up to what you'd expect from an ancillary product to the Snyder film and the comics. So, once on the trail of the Underboss, the heroes throw down looking for clues amongst the city's underworld trash and hunt down Underboss through a low-tier supercriminal called Jimmy the Gimmick in an abandoned amusement park, naturally. When they reach him, Jimmy is sniped from afar, which leads our pair into the sewers, because I guess it's a beat-em-up and they have sewer levels, dude. I don't know. They find a beaten and interrogated Mark Felt, director of the FBI. Felt was forced to give up the location of the villain's targets. Upon leaving the sewers, the pair are ambushed by the police. They fight through the cops, and further, through them, they seek out the location of the underboss that Felt gave them and his targets. When they finally reach their quarry, they find the reporters Woodward and Bernstein already dead. Underboss is claiming he's being framed, and he's executed by the comedian from far away. Sounds familiar to something that comedian has done in the past, who is obviously the true villain in this portion of the game. The story goes through events leading up to the breakup of Night Owl and Rorschach as partners, and the dissolution of the Watchmen, and basically the falling apart of superheroes in general. Rather than ruin the rest of the story of the game, since the game is definitely worth playing, let's just take a look at the other measurements we evaluate. Gameplay, audio, and graphics. And let's see if Watchmen gets our license to play. First, graphics. At the time, digitally distributed games had a reputation of being kind of crappy. I think one of the major pieces of evidence for me would have been that Summer of Games Xbox tried to do. It was an experiment Microsoft tried to have a bunch of influencers play a handful of games, Brothers, Ninja Turtles from the Shadows, Flashback, and Charlie Murder, to show off what their arcade games could look like, to show that there were quality games out there, and that the games could stand up to physical media-based games, but they really couldn't. The times to download a 30-gig game when that was going on would have been far too prohibitive to make a winning proposition to consider you're going digital instead of physical copies of things. So when they said Watchmen was only coming to Xbox Live services and PSN, I wrote it off. I shouldn't have, by the way. The graphics for the game represent the characters and events well. By intercutting the motion comic elements to kind of take the sting away from the lack of flashy things a game is expected to have, the animations and content are appropriate for a game of its length. It's about 4 hours maybe to play through and watch to get all the trophies if you play on all the difficulties. Both characters look exactly like their filmic counterparts, and the fight animations are brutal. So you take that with the voice actors being represented by their film counterparts, and some great bone-crunching sound effects and some good tunes, the game's a solid affair. Over its 2 acts and 9 chapters, the game delivers some solid gameplay and graphics, and most of all, represents the movie version of Watchmen in a very one-to-one kind of way. Even with all my problems with the flick, even with my problems with the flick's director, I am shocked at how close this title comes to Zack Snyder's vision and matches up to it. It's incredible. Most licensed properties come close, but you can tell they're not what they're supposed to be. In this case, you can't tell. It looks like this is a little precursor special before the movie came out. During the playtime of this game, I wasn't ever checking the clock. I was engaged by the story, and I felt like WB Games took the job seriously. But with all the questions out there, who is murdering reporters and freeing prisoners? Who is, in fact, watching the Watchmen? Only one question truly, really matters, and that question remains: so, does Watchmen The End is Nigh have a license to play? Yeah, of course. This game is actually a pretty great beat 'em up. You've seen the footage that I've shown, and it's really good. It's a great version of the movie. It represents the movie version of Watchmen really well. And since all the voice actors are from the movie, it gets top ratings from me. It's not a very long game, and it's not very expensive. If you get it on Steam, that's a tenner easily spent in my book, and I think you should do that. Now, I want to say thank you to all the folks who are subscribing over on the Ancillary channel that's just showing the shows. Thank you so much. Your subscriptions mean a lot, but all your comments and your input into the shows has really brightened my whole life up, I got to tell you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't thank you enough. In the meantime, this ends Superhero Summer, and next week we're going to do a property that I find really great, and after that, it's going to be one of the Space Pirates' actual recommendations, so stay tuned for those. So, with that being said, no matter what I've said during this broadcast, in a future broadcast, in the past, or anytime, remember to always, always, always stay retro. Peace.
Get upset on the internet. You're a salt adult. You're a salt adult. Get upset on the internet. You're a salt adult.